IVM.
Welcome to All Things Policy, a daily podcast supported by Pragati, a flagship media initiative of the Takshashila Institution. We're a bunch of policy nerds based in Bengaluru, and we like to bring a fresh perspective to Indian affairs and an Indian perspective to global affairs. So grab a cup of coffee, sit back, and join us for today's chat.
Hi, and welcome to another episode of All Things Policy. I'm Malathi Renati, and I head the policy school at Takshashila. And today I would like to go over the 8 principles of project management. Now, before I get into what project management or the 8 principles are, I would like to first give a kind of a formal definition of what a project is. Now, it's the PMBOK guide from PMI defines it as a temporary endeavor undertaken to create a unique project service or result. Now, note that the project has a definitive start and end, and the scope and resources too are defined. A project is always unique in that it is not a routine or it's not a process, but it's a set of operations designed to accomplish a singular goal. Some examples of projects could be, for example, building a metro station. It could be building a monument, infrastructure projects nationwide, where there's the roads being built across 2 cities. It could be something as simple as maybe even planning a vacation, a study plan for a competitive exam, for example. It could be merger of organizations. It could be even within an organization. There's a project that's been defined where it's identifying gaps and improving the processes in a department. Okay, now all of these, if you notice, they all have a definitive start and end. Now, project management has developed in a more evolutionary manner in the past from more technical endeavor to a socio-technical process. The primary focus of project management has been more on the delivery of project objectives. And these are expressed as more physical artifacts and the interrelationship of these artifacts with the organization and other resources. Now, traditionally, it's been more the industry sectors like construction and engineering, where project management was extensively used. But more recently, we find it more also in the non-traditional sectors, such as in banking and even in legal processes. Now, the extension of project management practices into all these areas of government and business represents the key challenges to the theory, practice, and application of project management. And the importance of project management in implementing, could be policies and other things. We'll see that as we go over the 8 principles. Now, the 8 principles of project management, the first one would be to imbibe the values and the vision of the organization and to define it so that those involved in the project are clear on what the vision of that particular project or organization is. Now, the reason I mention organization, and this could be used interchangeably to represent the state, to represent, maybe the municipal within, it could be at this district level. So I'm just going to be using more project management terminologies here, but this can be used across even different government bodies also. Okay. So the reason why we say the values and the vision of the organization is important is because even when assignments or projects that are within a particular organization or body, it should roll up to the long-term goals and the overall vision of that particular organization. This also ensures that all the wheels of a project are sort of aligned and efficiently rolling in the same direction. Project vision statement is important. It's also used to guide a project. It's to motivate the individuals involved in a project and to inspire them to get more involved. Now, the second principle of project management is to set clear project goals. Now, expectation setting is very crucial, and therefore, during the planning stage of a project, let's say you're implementing a certain policy, the expectations of that particular project should be clearly defined. Now, the SMART approach is one way. The SMART approach is an acronym for S being for specific, M, measurable, A is achievable, R is relevant, and T, time-bound, is a technique that is a well-established tool, for that matter, that you can use to plan and achieve goals. It also avoids a lot of ambiguity because you're clearly defining what each goal for that particular project is. For example, there could be one goal which says, increase the school enrollment by 15% in the rural areas by running awareness campaigns in all 4 districts and providing road connectivity to the hinterlands by the end of Q4 of 2024. So this could be a goal that's been set by a particular, for a particular project, and so that the members, whoever is involved in that, all the stakeholders involved in that project know what they're trying to achieve. Okay, so the second principle is about setting clear project goals. Now, the third one would be to identify the right team and define the roles and responsibilities for these individuals. Now, putting together the right team for the project prevents many failures downstream. Spelling out the roles and responsibilities of each of these team members also helps bring the clarity and avoids inadequate or redundancy of efforts at times. And it also kind of ensures that there is accountability. Okay, now this is it's important to get the right subject matter experts onto the team. And there are times when you might need certain expertise at a certain time in the project, in a certain phase in the project, and not later on. So bringing them in at the right time and ensuring that their role and their responsibilities are clearly defined is crucial when it comes to implementing policies as well. The fourth one is about spelling out the processes and the workflows that are involved while implementing a policy or while implementing a project. Now, we should avoid being person dependent. That's very important, because over time resources come and go, and whenever there's a tacit knowledge that gets lost with a resource, that also means that there's a lot of catching up that the project will have to do to get back on track. And this is also sometimes contributes to the delays in a project, which is why ensuring that there's redundancy, ensuring that wherever there is repetitive, or where there's repetition of activities, try to automate that, define workflows, ensure that there are enough resources knowing what has to be done, build backups, have documentation in place. This will make sure that whoever is part of the project is continuously aware of what's happening, and they can work in a very efficient manner and be less dependent on a few subject matter experts who might be crucial to the project, but they should not be. If they're not available, it should not be a showstopper. Now, capturing lessons learned and ironing out the kinks also is important. And this is having a growth mindset within the team. Cultivating that will ensure that the team is empowered to kind of work in a more efficient way, and they're kind of chugging along, and so they can achieve the project in a timely fashion. Okay. Now, we'll take a break here, and after the break, we will go over the remaining 4 principles of project management. Welcome back from the break. Now, in the first half, we went over the 4 project management principles, and these were defining the vision of the organization, the setting clear project goals, identifying the team along with their roles and responsibilities, and spelling out the workflows and processes. In this concluding half, we shall go over the remaining 4 principles of project management. So, 5th principle of project management is defining the metrics or the KPIs, the key performance indexes. Now, the metrics help to quantify individual and team efforts. It's important for us to identify them in whatever minimal or basic manner that we can. For example, for customer feedback, you might have an NPS score, where we're saying that we want to ensure that 80% of the score should be in the 9 and 10 category, which is of a rating of 1 to 10. A salesperson might have a metric or a KPI which says they need to have 10 contracts that are signed at the end of every quarter, okay? Or maybe something like ensuring that the SLAs that are met at least 98% of the time, SLAs are being met. Now, these metrics need to be monitored in a regular manner. So not just identifying metrics and KPIs are important, but also ensuring that they're monitored regularly. These could be part of weekly status reports, where the team is aware of the efforts that they're putting in, it's being quantified, and they see a number against a target, and they know where they're heading. And these reports or these numbers could then eventually roll up to the monthly and quarterly report, where you have other stakeholders looking at it, let's say the management or the sponsor for that particular project. So having metrics or KPIs defined at the onset is also a very important part of project management, because it helps to then quantify the efforts that are being put into the project. Now, the 6th principle of project management, and a very important one, is effective communication and stakeholder management. Now, often stakeholder management is not really done in as an efficient manner as one would hope, because it's often all stakeholders are not taken into consideration. Now, let's just consider a large government project, and I'll just touch upon that briefly now. Government policies and processes represent a huge challenge for project management, because there are lots of stakeholders involved. Policy processes, for example, are not conducted within strict organizational boundaries, but they involve extensive range of organizations in the government sector, industry, commercial organizations, the civil society. So the Samaj Sarkar Bazaar are all touched upon, and which means that there's so many different stakeholders that have to be managed. not only the expectations, but also to ensure that they are involved. So having a stakeholder management, plan together and ensuring that these stakeholders are kept informed is as important as, running the project. Now, I'd like to mention about one of the habits of the 7 habits of highly effective people that Stephen Covey has in the book that he's written. And there's one habit that really stands out, and that's about the win-win, the habit on ensuring that agreements or solutions are mutually beneficial and mutually satisfying. So always ensure that in any stakeholder management that you approach negotiations with a win-win mindset, because then it brings value while also ensuring long-term confidence in stakeholders. Now, making sure that the people involved, the stakeholders involved are also informed, depends also on the responsibility or the role of that stakeholder. Now, there's a matrix that in the past was very commonly used, known as the RACI. Again, it's an acronym. So RACI, a RACI matrix, which kind of helps to identify the different stakeholders and the role that they play. Let me just give you an example of, let's say, a construction of, let's say, a roadway or a highway between 2 cities. And the different stakeholders who are involved would be the project manager, the architect, the contractor, consultant, who will be an external stakeholder, and the client. So this could be also used for construction of a building. Right? So let's say when it comes to defining the requirements. When it comes to defining the requirements, and if you have a building that you want to construct, the client would be responsible. The architect is also responsible for putting those details together. But the person accountable, and only one person can be accountable for a particular activity. And think of the person accountable as the person behind the steering wheel, right? A steering wheel of a bus, let's say. There can only be one driver. So the person accountable can be only one for a given activity, whereas the number of people responsible could be multiple. So in this case, you have the architect who's giving his inputs, the client who's giving their inputs, whereas the project management is the one who's ensuring that all these people get together, ensuring that the requirements are gathered and they're kind of documented appropriately. The RACI would be the people who have to be consulted. Typically, these are the subject matter experts or people who have had some experience in the past for that particular activity, with whom you would just want to kind of have a word to get a better understanding of how best to go about with it. Okay, so that they'll be the ones who have to be consulted. Here too, there could be one or many. And the I in the RACI would be the people who need to be informed. Now, these people will just be getting information about how the project is progressing. In this case, what the requirements are. They're not going to be involved in the decision making, but they just need to be informed so that they know at what pace the project is kind of progressing. Now, this is the part where many people miss out, because they feel that the ones who are not really visible within a project are not really kept in the loop. But this is really wrong, because when everything is going fine, this might work okay, where you're not informing these stakeholders who are not informing stakeholders who otherwise are crucial for the project. But when things go wrong is when when it will backfire. So always remember that it's important that all stakeholders are kept informed, and you identify who's accountable and who are the stakeholders responsible, the ones who need to be consulted, the ones who need to be informed. Now, the 7th principle of project management is risk management. And this is a very important part of managing a project. To identify, to assess, and to proactively manage risks is crucial. Now, risks could be of different kinds. It could be of different magnitudes. But to mitigate these risks, that is essentially mitigation, is to be proactive and to see how you can prevent it. And to have contingency or to have backup plans for it is important, so that you envision this upfront and preempt anything before it happens. Okay, so always being prepared, always going into every aspect of or every phase of a project, being prepared, keeping an eye on the horizon, and also ensuring that things are being monitored is important for a project so that you kind of don't run into unknown challenges. Okay. Now, the different ways of how you can identify risks. Typically, there'll be a risk register, and where you kind of maintain everything. You kind of identify whether it's low, medium, high. But there are different ways of doing this. But this is an important aspect that has to be kept in mind while managing a project or while implementing a process. Now, the 8th and the last principle I just want to mention would be to track the scope, the cost, and time, while of course maintaining quality. But to monitor all of these, the golden triangle as it's called in project management, the scope, the cost, and time, throughout the project. Any changes to any one of these will impact the project. And which is why it's important that the monitoring and control is done across all of these aspects. Now, one example I can give you that comes to mind of a mega project, in fact, which was actually run by a very well-known infrastructure company, where this was the Boston Central Tunnel project, which is commonly known as the Big Dig. Boston is one of the oldest cities in the US. It's in the state of New Hampshire. And this project was envisioned, where they wanted to build, it was one of the largest and the most complex and the most technically challenging highway projects in the history of America, where they were building this underground tunnel, through under the city of Boston. And it was supposed to start in 1982 and end by 1989, but it ran into so many complications and so many delays. And they were only able to complete it after 25 years. There were cost overruns, there were flaws in the design, there's poor execution and use of low-quality material, and multiple construction accidents which contributed to the delay. But the actual project management principles were actually implemented a little late in the projects, which kind of delayed the whole process and eventually led to the downfall. This is just an example, but there are many out there. But it's also to show why project management is important and why in government policies for the successful implementation, these principles have to be employed. And in future episodes, of course, I will delve more into the challenges of policy implementation with specific case studies. But for this episode, these are the 8 project management principles that I wanted to cover. And with that, we come to the end of this episode. And please do listen to other episodes of All Things Policy. It's available on the IVM Podcast Network. Thank you.
If you liked our show, don't forget to check out other interesting podcasts on the IVM network. You can tune into them on the IVM Podcast app, ivmpodcast.com, or wherever you listen to your podcasts. You can also follow IVM on social media. The handle is @IVM Podcasts on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. And hey, if you'd like to dive into Takshashila's research on technology, strategy, and economic affairs, check us out at our Twitter handle @TakshashilaINST or our website takshashila.org.in.